So, chapter 1148 of One Piece is officially out. And by officially out, I mean it's been leaked a couple of days before the official release, like it does every single week. And if you're a degenerate like me who constantly reloads every single website that maybe could have possibly updated the chapter so I can read it as soon as physically possible, well then you'll know everything that's happened in this chapter already. However, if you don't like computer viruses, I got you. And it's a good week to let me have you because boy, oh boy, is this a big, albeit confusing chapter. See, 1148 has not only moved the Elbath arc forward as the combined forces of the Holy Knights Junko or Gunko, I'm not really sure how we're saying her name, and Sommers are still terrorizing Elbath, but the end of this chapter not only reveals that the Minister of Love in the left hand of Gold D. Roger, Scooper Bogon, is still one of the most powerful people in the universe, but it's also possibly revealed either a new form of Conquerors Hockey or an entirely different moveset that allows for the Holy Knights to be injured. A new form of power that will undoubtedly be taught to the Straw Hats as they face more and more powerful foes, all of whom have the Mark of the Abyss. But where did this power come from? What is Robin up to? Are the child giants okay? And has the knowledge of Ohara been set ablaze? Well, today we're going to be answering all those questions and a whole lot more because today we're talking chapter 1148 of One Piece explained. But before we get to explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional Nick video a week, guys, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. Now, chapter 1148 is titled Ranja. And for those of you who that name means nothing to, I can't necessarily say I blame you. Ranja is one of the 10 giant children who is currently being kidnapped through the combined forces of Gunko and Sommers. She was probably the character out of all of the kidnapped children that left the biggest impression last week, because while all of the other children were being dour and depressed about the fact that they were currently being kidnapped, Ranja, with a gigantic smile on her face, told the rest of them to not worry and that everything would be okay. And the reason the chapter is named after her is because it's a pretty Ranja heavy chapter. See, the chapter opens with Gunko forcing Ranja, the most optimistic out of all of the children and therefore probably the best one to kill first, to the edge of the branch that they've been marching down now for the last couple of chapters. That is to say that Gunko and all of the kidnapped children have reached the end of branch 8, the superhighway of Elbath. Now, this is incredibly nerve-wracking for all of the children currently watching Ranja be marched to the edge. And I want to say be walked off the plank, but it's not really a plank. It's what planks are made out of, but it's like pre-plank. Regardless, while the 9 other children freak out about the fact that Ranja is about to be murdered in front of them, Ranja reassures all of them. With tears flowing out of her eyes, but still a huge smile on her face, she tells all of them, "Don't worry, I've always been lucky. Everything will turn out fine." And while I hate to tell a child they're wrong, being kidnapped, then being singled out of the 10 children being kidnapped to be the first one to die isn't what I would count as luck. Anyways, with Ranja in position to be the first out of possibly 10 sacrifices, Gunko calls up Sommers and lets him know that the first child is in position, which prompts Sommers to once again pick up the horn and address Elbath, letting them know if they don't make a decision in the next 30 seconds, a child, Ranja, will die. Now, obviously Sommers is mostly addressing Chief Jarl, who ultimately, after the death of King Harald, is kind of the giant in charge of Elbath. And thus Sommers is addressing Chief and/or Elder Jarl and telling him to burn down the Walrus School and adjacent library, or kids are gonna start dying. Now, to this point, that I'd like to remind everybody that the reason that the Holy Knights are on Elbath in the first place and want the school and the library burnt down is because all of the findings of Ohara are currently stored inside of said library, and thus the secret of the Void Century is technically on the island of Elbath. This is because all of the scientists and researchers of Ohara threw all of their books and findings into the lake on the island, and the giants alongside Vegapunk went to Ohara to recover said books, which have since been dried up and stored in the magical library that is the Walrus School's library. Now, immediately after Sommers addresses all of Elbath, telling them to burn down this treasure trove of information, giants from all across the island scream out in anger as they talk about how destroying this wealth of information would be a travesty to humankind. And others don't necessarily take issue with the fact that they would be essentially losing what is humankind's greatest research discovery, but rather that by burning the library in the school, Elbath and all of the giants would be taking a knee to foreign invaders. However, equally as vocal on the other side of the equation here are giants saying that the lives of the children are more important than dusty old books, and thus Elbath is split. But unfortunately, they don't have too much time to be split. We We then shift back to Robin, who it's important to remember here is currently hiding in the back of Saul's hair with Chopper. Now, this entire situation has been incredibly stressful for Robin. She's on Elbath with the only other survivor of the Ohara massacre, Saul, the man who pseudo-raised her. She's had to feel and listen to Saul getting almost murdered by Sommers in a fight he had no chance in, while he tried to defend the information that every single person she ever knew died protecting. Tie that into the fact that basically ever since Egghead Island, the government has tripled how hard they're looking for Robin, and really through no fault of her own, she decides to start taking things into her own hands. See, she immediately turns to Chopper and says, "Stay back, don't fight." But you know, it's Chopper, probably for the best. His most impressive thing is that he gets giant, and giants aren't doing that good right now. And immediately after telling Chopper to hang back, Robin says that she can't take it anymore and that she needs to go out there herself and fight back. We then cut to Nami, who is tied up alongside Usopp, Jinbei, and Brook, who yells out that even the most fiendish of villains wouldn't hurt children. We then cut to Ripley and Frankie and a couple of other giants, and a reminder here that Ripley and Frankie have not been caught up in any of this nonsense because Ripley was showing off the tree that Elbath is built on to Frankie because the Elbath tree is an atom wood tree, also known as the hardest wood in existence and what the Thousand Sunny is made out of. I like to do reminders of what everybody is doing in Elbath right now because everybody is very split up, like Fishman Island level of split up. Anyways, Ripley, Frankie, and a couple of other giants all split up to go and help the children. We then cut back to Sommers, who's still giving a speech about how not one single book should survive this fire, as he lets the world know that the Holy Knights' goal here is to erase Elbath's history and culture. Because mind you, the Holy Knights are also here because they believe a war similar to the one that took place during the Void Century is on the way, and they want the giants to be slaves to the world government in said war. And thus, if the giants have no culture, they're more likely to give into the idea of being slaves. However, while Sommers is giving this speech, Robin appears using her devil fruit powers, and she slaps him to the ground and then immediately grabs his neck and bends his back over her shoulder, breaking his back, causing him to spit up blood. However, as this would have killed most mortal people, Robin immediately realizes, but maybe too late, that Sommers, like Guko, is immortal. Sommers then stands up, jams his skeleton back into the right position, and lets all of Elbath know that there is only 20 seconds remaining. And thus Robin realizes in a moment of desperation, there's truly nothing she can do, except maybe inflict so much damage on Sommers that his body has no ability to regenerate. And thus Robin runs at Sommers, the Holy Knight, and grabs him, sending the both of them off the cliff he was standing nearby. And as the two of them hurtle toward their presumed death, Sommers asks if she intends to take her own life, and that while her feelings move him, he has no intention of dying with her. To which Robin responds by saying that she knows that he's immortal, but even if she can't kill him, she can still move the children out of the effective range of his devil fruit powers. And if she's able to do that, the other should be able to save the children with very little difficulty. Now, as the two of them fall hundreds of feet, Sommers laughs at this plan and grows thorns out of his body that impale Robin everywhere, presumably killing her. However, it's at this moment that it's revealed that the Robin that was tackling Sommers off the cliff was a clone. But the damage incurred to clones and additional limbs should be sent back to the original body, right? So if the clone is stabbed through the neck and the head, that damage should be transferred back to Robin's main body. That's how the Hana Hana no Mi works. And yet, that's not what happens. And we don't really know why. See, some are going the more artistic route here and saying that thorns can't cut petals. But that doesn't mean anything. Others are saying that the trauma of all of this moment caused Robin to awaken her devil fruit, and thus previous restrictions no longer apply. That is to say, if one of Robin's arms, legs, or clones is injured, those injuries aren't conveyed back to her main body. But for the moment, at least based off the leaks that I currently have, there is no answer as to why Robin was able to tank this presumably fatal attack. Especially when you consider the fact that the last time that we saw Robin in combat was Wano, and even in her devil child or gigantic form, any and all damage conveyed to the limbs that she grew was conveyed back to her main body. But who knows, maybe her devil fruit has awoken. But then we would have presumably seen the smoke ring that appears around an awakened devil fruit user that we see on awakened devil fruit users like Lucci and Luffy. And we don't see that, so that's not the best answer. As it currently stands, we just don't know. Anyways, the Robin that dies is a clone, while the main Robin is actually shuffled off to try and save the Straw Hats. The Straw Hats being Nami, Usopp, Jinbei, and Brook. And this is kind of a really cool full circle moment. Because, well, technically out of those four, only Nami and Usopp are at Water 7. This is eerily reminiscent in a full circle kind of way of the Straw Hats pulling up on Water 7 to save Robin. They saved her, she's saving them. And while Robin struggles to cut the binds off her fellow Straw Hats, saying that even with a knife, it's almost impossible to undo these binds, which leads Usopp to the conclusion that the only way that they'll be broken out of this current situation is if Gunko is defeated. Summers, who's now been thrown off a cliff, killed a clone of Robin, and stopped his fall using his thorn-based devil fruit, lets the Jarl know that he only has 10 seconds to start burning some books. Like it's Fahrenheit 451, or, you know, what the American government currently wishes it was doing right now. And thus, in order to incentivize Chief Jarl to give the order to burn some books, he tells Gunko to let the children speak. Because nothing gets adults moving like children begging for their life. And thus, who amongst the children is gonna represent their voice? Well, Ranja. See, the fatal miscalculation that the Holy Knights made here is that one, they put the Optimist up front, and two, they gave her a mic. And thus Ranja goes on a monologue, talking about how she loves her friends, school, and all the things they learned there. She also loves the library and all of the books inside of it. She also says that she was taught to not hurt other people and not do things that other people wouldn't like. And thus she says, if we were to lose the school and the library, it would hurt a lot of people. And thus saving her life would technically hurt a lot of people. And thus she tells Jarl, who's technically her great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, to not save her. She then, through tears and trembles, says that she's been lucky in her life up until this point, and once again tells everybody that everything will be okay. And behind the backing of this rousing speech, Summers then counts from 3 down to 0. And as he hits 0, Jarl gives the order to Anji, the assistant giant to Saul, and also the librarian, to burn down the library. We then see Summers return from his quick stint with freediving and appear in front of Robin, quickly capturing her before she's able to free any of the other Straw Hats. However, as Summers reaches towards Robin, presumably to kill her for real this time, his hand is cut clean off. And as he looks down at the stump that once was his hand, he realizes it's not growing back. And as Summers is looking at his arm, trying to figure out why his arm isn't regenerating, he screams, "It's not growing back!" And in this moment, it becomes very clear who just slashed Summers faster than he was able to react to. It's Gabon, who appears in front of him and says, "Summers, it's been a while," implying that not only have the two of them met before, but more likely than not, the two of them have fought before. Very similar to how Rayleigh showed up in Sabaody Archipelago and fought against Kizaru, except now instead of the right hand of Goldie Roger, it's the left hand. Now Summers immediately clocks Gabon and says, "Scooper Gabon!" But before he's able to finish the words, Scooper flies in and slashes him across the chest. And the chapter ends with Summers' face twisted in agony. Well, let's answer that first question first, because it's less ambiguous. The most likely answer as to how Gabon and Summers know each other is the God Valley incident. Now, for those of you who don't remember Kuma's backstory, I mean, I guess that's not that crazy, but I'd just go ahead and watch the One Piece anime right now if I was you. But basically, every 3 years, the ruling class of the One Piece world, that is to say, the Celestial Dragons and the Holy Knights, hosts something known as the Native Hunting Competition. And 38 years ago, God Valley was the location where the Native Hunting Competition was thrown. See, God Valley was an island that existed in the West Blue. However, because it technically didn't fall under the purview or control of the world government, and because the world government believed that a name like God Valley was sacrilegious, I guess, they were chosen as the host of this event. And thus the natives and a bunch of other captured slaves like Emporio Ivankov, Kuma, and Ginny were hunted down as sport by people like Saint Saturn, the Celestial Dragons, Saint Garling, who's the current head of the Holy Knights, and Shanks' father. But this isn't the only thing that God Valley is known for, as also 38 years ago, God Valley was the site where Garp worked together with Goldie Roger and the Roger Pirates to defeat the, at that time, strongest pirate crew on Earth, the Rocks Pirates. And thus, over the course of this battle, the Rocks Pirates and Rox de Zebek, the head of the Rocks Pirates, were defeated, and thus the Rocks Pirates were dismantled. However, following this ridiculously high-level battle, God Valley just disappeared as an island, like Lelouchia. But this isn't before Silver's Rayleigh Rayleigh and Scooper Gabon found Shanks in a trunk. And as Shanks was a baby left in a trunk on a strange island, the Rogers Pirates decided to take him with them. And thus, the most likely reason that Sommers knows Gabon is because both of them either met or fought in the God Valley 38 years ago. And it was most likely during this fight that Gabon figured out how to hurt the Holy Knights. Information that he seems to be using right now to hurt Sommers. But now that we've answered the question of how these two know each other, about how exactly Gabon is hurting Sommers. See, as it currently stands, there's 4 theories, and all of them are pretty viable. The first and maybe most boring theory is that Gabon targeted the arm of Sommers that held the Mark of the Abyss. Now, while the Mark of the Abyss is still a very hazy, not that well explained aspect of this story, that's done rather intentionally. But we do know that everybody who has Abyss-based powers, be they the Holy Knights or the 5 Elders, seems to bear a mark of the Abyss. And thus the ability to use all these Abyss-based powers like teleportation and rapid regeneration may be tied to having that mark. And thus if you cut that mark off somebody, they may lose access to all of those Abyss-based powers. Now, to me, this seems like a pretty glaring and crazy weakness, especially because we're placing these marks of the Abyss on very chop-offable limbs. Like, take a note out of Sakura and Tsunade's book. Put your strength of 100 ceiling mark on your forehead. However, this isn't the only theory. Others are theorizing that Gabon has access to some kind of heightened Conquerors Hockey. Conquerors Hockey that allows for him to do damage to those who are able to regenerate, or maybe even that allows for him to counter the power of the Mark of the Abyss. And this is slightly corroborated by the fact that when we see Gabon in the final double spread of chapter 1148, not only is there Haki lightning bolts shooting out of him, but there's also Haki lightning bolts shooting out of the slash he landed on Sommers' chest, implying that he does seem to be using Conquerors Hockey, or some iteration of it. And to assume that the left hand of Goldie Roger had Conquerors Hockey is not a crazy assumption to make. Now, a smaller minority of people who I actually believe more than the Conquerors Hockey route here are saying that this is some kind of new power, yet unseen to us, the One Piece fans. See, Gabon is kind of an enigma, and he's introduced into the story in chapter, I believe, 1134. He introduces himself as the Minister of Love. He talks about how multiracial marriages are becoming more and more common, which is pertinent because he himself is common law married to a giant. And thus, some people are theorizing that the reason that Gabon was actually able to cut Sommers was because he controls the power of unbounded love. And as the Holy Knights seem like particularly hateful people, and the power of the Abyss could absolutely tie the roots of its powers back to the idea of hatred, it's a possibility that by attacking with love in your heart, you're able to counteract the power of the Abyss. On top of that, that's not the only time that we've seen attacks that seem to be tied to emotion in some way or another. See, Garp's Fist of Love, which was vastly believed to kind of just be a trope that allowed for him to beat the living hell out of his grandchildren, may have actually been something he learned in the God Valley incident. See, it's kind of ironic that Garp has been punching Ace and Luffy with the Fist of Love his entire life, and right now we have the self-proclaimed Minister of Love who fought alongside Garp against the Holy Knights using what could be a love-based attack. And both of these attacks could be in the vein of an attack that we saw from Kobe with his honesty impact. See, the idea of emotions strengthening your abilities is not new to the One Piece universe. However, the idea that you're able to insert those emotions into your attacks to give them special properties kind of is. And thus, this vocal minority that's buying into the idea that love is what's allowing Gabon to overcome the Holy Knights believes, very similarly to how Rayleigh was able to teach Luffy to deal with Logias and kind of how to use observation hockey, that the left hand of Goldie Roger will teach Luffy and the rest of the Straw Hats how to injure Holy Knights, the 5 Elders, and later, possibly Emu. And lastly, it is worth noting here that some people are theorizing that Gabon's axes were somehow upgraded in Laugh Tale, which is why when Luffy was battling against Gabon in order to get Loki's key, it wasn't until Gabon busted out his axes that Zoro told Luffy to dodge and blocked his attacks, saving his captain. And while this is absolutely a possibility, I mean, it's important to note here that the information surrounding the Void Century seemed to be about an ultra-futuristic kingdom that had access to technology that blows the technology even on Egghead Island out of the water. And thus, maybe if Gabon got access to that information, like he almost definitely did in Laugh Tale, he used said information to upgrade his weapons to be able to hurt people with the Mark of the Abyss. And maybe, just maybe, he'll teach those practices to the Straw Hats. But if we're being entirely real with ourselves, that is by far and away the worst possible explanation. Especially when you're trying to use the idea of Zoro making sure Luffy doesn't get hit by the left hand of Goldie Roger's axes as evidence. Luffy's weakness has always been slashing weapons. Of course, Zoro didn't want him to be hit by those slashing weapons. And with that, that's everything we know about chapter 1148 of One Piece. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. Why do you think Gabon is able to hurt Sommers? Do you think it's his weapons? Do you think it's love? Some new form of Conquerors Hockey? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that noti bell. Usually I cut my burps, but that was a good one, so we're gonna keep it. Also, what's going on with Robin?